Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron.
And I'm Brett.
And you're listening to The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
We know it's a dangerous business going out your door, or when choosing a podcast, but we're glad you've joined our adventure as we discuss The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
And so it begins. All right, welcome back to part 2 of the season 2 recap, and we're going to dive right in with the characters in Eregion.
Okay, well, shall we get to where we spent this whole time, we haven't even hardly talked about the man of the show, which is it Sauron or is it Celebrimbor? Stay tuned for the Brimby episode to find out who our MVP is.
Indeed.
But to Eregion, I think for me, one of the most improved characters. I mentioned Muriel earlier, but Galadriel herself really had an astonishing redemption to her character this season. And it took the whole season to get there, but I think she made it.
She did, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I still just have issue with the character that they have given for Galadriel. And the development you're referring to, although was good, only needed to exist because of the hole they put her in from the beginning. And I get it. I get that, we can't have this fully developed main character right out of the gate. And we kind of talked about in previous episodes that, there was probably a decision between who's going to be our main protagonist, Galadriel or Elrond. They chose Galadriel. I guess I just still have a beef with that decision. And it's nothing against Galadriel. It's just that this isn't who she is. She's a princess of the Noldor, one of the few elves, honestly, even in the Second Age, who were around to, bask in the light of the trees in Valinor. And one of the only elves that has a connection to both the seen and the unseen world. And so, she's not another general, basically, is what I'm trying to, with a bunch of character flaws. Anyway, again, broken record. I'll subdue myself with that, but it's still there.
I think that we've reached the point now where going forward, we're going to see strong Galadriel going forward. I would be surprised to see any lapse in character or judgment from her going forward. I think there'll be struggle, obviously, in the war of Sauron and the elves, but I think the time of her, I think wise and powerful Galadriel has arrived.
I hope so, and I agree with you. I think any digression back to the Galadriel we've been experiencing would be a mistake. So I hope that's the truth. Let's get into some of the stuff that kind of is the main question marks right now for Galadriel, or the main of the highlights of the season. So we have seen her with Sauron, right? Season 1, season 2. They have this relationship. Where do you think that goes from here?
I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to be something that stays with her. I think there's going to always be a connection there, particularly now that she's been stabbed by his crown. I think we're going to see more going on there, which I have more to say about in a little bit.
Yes.
But again, to what I said, I don't think we're going to see her longing for that relationship, thinking, what if, being seriously tempted by that again. That last battle that we had where he turned into Halbrand, you just see on her face like, oh crap. Like she was mentally affected by being reminded of Halbrand.
Yep. Do you think that it is going to hold sway over her moving forward, or do you think that she has kind of steeled herself against it?
I think she's ready to go. I think she's steeled against it. I think she does. She says, "Heal yourself," which was kind of probably a Middle Earth euphemism for something else people might have said. I think
100%.
was the send off to any feelings or yearnings at that point.
I completely agree. Okay, we talked about the Morgul Blade a little bit. Do you think that she's like healed from that, or do you think that that's going to play a role later on down the road?
So here's my bold prediction. Put this down. We'll record this. My bold prediction is
pen is at the ready.
Good. Calligraphy, I hope. My bold prediction is that we will see Dark Galadriel in season 3, meaning the witch form that she kind of takes with Frodo at her mirror.
Yes.
And in the Hobbit trilogies, we see her turn into Dark Galadriel to banish the Nazgul. I think we're going to see the first stages of that in season 3, and it will be because of the influence of the Morgul wound that she has sustained. The fact that she has a ring to constantly combat the effects of that, helps balance that out. But I think that's where the show is saying she gets that dark form from.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully that does happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One other thing with her is a little bit of her other relationships. Do you think that they are going to bring Celeborn into the series? Will we see Celebrion? Or is Elrond going to be her future lover?
Oh. I want to believe the cast interviews that I've watched that say that the kiss was just a distraction. That is what I want to believe.
They do seem pretty. They do seem pretty in lockstep with that, don't they? Almost to the point where they were told to say it.
Oh, stop it. Just stop it. I feel like Morfydd Clark, the Galadriel actor, did say at some point that Celeborn is out there somewhere.
Okay. Even though her character in the show said he's dead.
He's dead. He died.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. I do hope Celeborn makes an appearance. We'll see if that happens, but I would not be surprised if they had some type of a fling with Elrond. And I think it's ultimately not going to work out, but I just wonder if they're going to toy with that.
But if not her, then her daughter's the next best thing, right?
Exactly.
I think, clearly there was some good old romantic sexual tension between Sauron and Galadriel, and now apparently even with Elrond. I think they've, used that for what it's worth these first 2 seasons. Now that Galadriel's squared away, done with Sauron, I think they're good to bring Celeborn back into the picture.
Yep. All right, let's skip over to Elrond here. Beginning of the season, he helps introduce us to Círdan because he's so against these rings, right? Against Galadriel. And then, as the season progresses, we see him kind of step into this warrior general role, moving away from his diplomat role that he was in the first season. First of all, what'd you think about that? What'd you think about Elrond, the warrior general?
I will tolerate it. I don't totally buy it. I think the handoff from High King Gil-galad with his 30-foot spear of death and destruction seemed a little clunky. It seemed like Gil-galad should have been center stage for that. I get it for TV. This is a show about Elrond and not about Gil-galad. But
he should have either been center stage or completely absent, I think.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was an error. I think that Elrond, though... Oh, go ahead.
No, please. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that Elrond, and listening to some of the interviews, he kind of says that, that was on purpose, that the warrior general side of him was underdeveloped because he hadn't really ever been in that role before. And we still have a lot of time left, I guess, before the Battle of the Last Alliance. But I guess I expected more out of Elrond as a warrior / general.
Yeah, we didn't get any real leadership shots other than, all right, attack. And then, of course, Durin will come.
Yeah. And this is the guy who's fighting off 3 Nazgul at a time in The Hobbit, right? So and that's kind of where I'm coming from. I expected a little bit more. I understand that this is the depictions of Elrond that we've seen thus far is from the Third Age, and this is the Second Age, but still, anyway.
You have him as maybe the biggest disappointment of season 2.
I do.
Wow.
Just because the Elrond that I know, I guess, is kind of this, I don't know how else to say it besides bad A. He has this seer quality to him as well. And I just not only didn't get that out of this season, but almost got the opposite on both fronts, right? Like with the rings. He can't see, 5 feet down the road that this is a necessity. He has to, fight tooth and nail and ask everyone else's opinion about it, trying to get someone to agree with him. And it's like that totally shows a lack of not only being able to see into the future, but just open-mindedness, period, And so it kind of went against, and to me, that's a core characteristic of Elrond. The other one would be this warrior thing that I mentioned already. I just think that they fell a little bit short of a proper representation. Even if they were trying to portray, someone that's a little bit out of his element, sure. But I don't buy that Elrond was ever not very gifted with the sword.
Yeah. Yep. I like what they did with showing his development from his resistance to using the rings at all costs to finally, he jumped off the waterfall, did Pocahontas, which I thought was interesting that Galadriel kind of did that same thing to protect the rings from, or to protect her ring from Sauron. But so we go from that with Elrond to now he accepts the fact that I've got to save my friend, and the rings do have some redeeming qualities about them, and he does use it to heal Galadriel. Kind of convenient that Gil-galad can't do it by himself. It requires another. But I thought it was good.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Gil-galad was more of a disappointment in season 2 than Elrond was. But I guess from what I was hoping for Elrond, he fell short.
That's fair.
And the Gil-galad character, I guess we'll just talk about him now. We can get out of order a little bit here, but I think we're on the same page with him of, he fell short. It kind of just seemed like he was an afterthought to the plot and had like some contractual agreement that he needed so many episodes of FaceTime on the camera or whatever. I'm not sure. But they did not do him a favor. And I don't think that it was the actor's fault. I don't think that it is Gil-galad's fault. I think it's literally the showrunners and the writers who kind of watered this one down for us.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair. And it'd be nice if we could. It does seem like a battle between screen time between the two, Gil-galad and Elrond, and maybe we see a handoff here pretty soon. Let's talk about our quasi-villain, Adar, the father of the orcs.
Yeah.
Man, I never thought that by the end I'd be cheering for him to. We suspected he was going to die all season long. I didn't think I'd be hoping for a way for him to come back, or even entertaining the possibility that he might come back. But yet here we are.
I have been surprised myself with. I think he is the character I've thought most about since the show ended. And I am really hoping that we are not done with Adar. I'm really hoping that the Valar send him back in some form. Because, yeah, that last sequence from the time he wears the ring and reveals himself to Galadriel until his death is just gold, in my opinion. And I hope they don't waste that as a one-off.
Yeah, they send him back, but it's not like he's forsaken the mission of the orcs and said, "Oh, elves first, foremost, and forever." Like he still is entirely loyal to his children. How does the Valar? I mean,
but not at the expense anymore of anyone else.
Fair.
And I think that is something that the Valar might be able to get behind because, like he said in the first season, Eru is giving them breath.
Just like anybody else.
Yep.
So
there's opportunity.
So it sounds like we both want him back.
We do.
How wild is that?
I do. Yeah. I did not think we'd be here, did we?
No. But jeez. Yeah, great symmetry with him killing Sauron at the beginning and then his orcs turning on him at the end.
Indeed. And will the symmetry continue with him coming back?
Oh. Very good. So the murderer, the real villain then of this season is none other than Glug. Whatever
his name is.
Whatever his name is.
Yeah, and good riddance, honestly. He was kind of the character through which he was the vehicle that they introduced this idea of an orc family and feel bad for the baby orcs and all that kind of stuff. He's dead now. I think that whole storyline is going to die with him. Did you see it coming, though? I think we did, right?
I think we did. And I think it was a gift from the showrunners, kind of like, here, if you're struggling to follow what's going on, here's something you might be able to pick up on and you can feel good about getting it right. It seemed a little easy there towards the end.
Yeah.
But I thought the execution was awesome.
We're not diving in a whole lot to fan questions this episode, but there was one that particularly applies to this discussion. They said, how is there always a seemingly endless supply of orcs? Do they have litters at a time? Do they live forever? Are they immortal like elves? Do we know the answer to a lot of that?
Well, that's a good question. We might need to have Matt do some research on that, because they are corrupted. They come from corrupted elves. Adar being one of the Moriondor, the first Uruks, is immortal.
Yes. I don't think that they are immortal. I went back to, when I saw this question, I went back to the first episode of the season and tried to see if Gluck maybe was in that scene initially where they killed Sauron. And I couldn't see him. So you would think that he would be there as kind of Adar's man, and that's how he became Adar's man moving forward. But I didn't see him. I don't think that they're immortal. I think just the Moriondor are immortal, the original elves. But yeah, we can do some research on that.
Yeah, they certainly have a lot more numbers than the elves of Eregion. That is for sure.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Before we get to Brimby and Anatar Sauron, let's hit some miscellaneous characters real fast just to check on them. Círdan, loved Círdan. We only got him for 2 episodes. Is he coming back?
That was the disappointment, right? He was awesome. One of the highlights of the first part of the season, and then crickets. And I think that was a big disappointment. I'm starting to just run into a problem that there's just not enough, right? We don't have enough time to get, to just fully immerse ourselves here. And I'm sure the showrunners have this same frustration. But yeah, I wish we could see more of Círdan. And it was almost like, okay, he got brought in to assuage Elrond's concerns. Plus, we had to introduce where this third ring was going to go that we just created. But it makes you wonder, is that the end of him? Does he, has he fulfilled his role for this series? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually have a prediction that has to do with how the whole show will end, which I'm not revealing yet, but I am excited to see that. Well, I don't know it, but I would be very excited to see him hand off his ring to Gandalf at some point in the show. We know that that's kind of a Third Age event, but I propose that this show is not called the Second Age of Middle-earth. It's called the Rings of Power. And I propose that we may see some events from the Third Age. Yeah, make their way into this. And they may even be flashed forwards. Like I said, I've got a prediction for how the entire show will end.
I think that would mostly be a question of what they have the rights to talk about, right? Because they are somewhat limited in what they can talk about. Like, I know for sure the Silmarillion is off limits, right? And there are some things that they kind of dance around from the Silmarillion because they can't actually say it.
Yep. But they've got the Lord of the Rings, and they've got the appendices to the Lord of the Rings. And so that ring handoff happens. We get that in the appendices. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. I'll reveal my prediction in a later episode.
Okay.
But I think he's coming back. He's great.
I like it. Well, we need to see at least something more of him I feel like, because everyone else, I think everyone's just wondering, like, what good does the ring do Círdan, or while Círdan holds it, right? Like, obviously, we can kind of surmise a role with Gandalf, because Gandalf is an active player in combating evil. But if Círdan is just gonna, sand some wood in the Grey Havens for the next 1,000 years, what are we doing there? So
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with that. But yeah, I hope we see him again, because, like you said, great character. Loved him in the first couple of episodes, right? So
yep. Speaking of someone else that we love and have always loved and have never been critical of ever, Arondir.
Yes, our favorite, the best non-Legolas there ever was.
And
well,
now a
that's
member
it.
of the High. We should almost re-record that. So I'll make a note to cut my voice, and then let's come back to you just saying, well, that's it. So marking.
Okay. So we see a little bit of, initially he's dealing with this sudden death of Bronwyn, which was kind of thrown on the showrunners, right? Not really intended. And he's kind of dealing with the resulting riff with Theo. He saves a lot of people. Seems like he just is randomly showing up, has a keen sense of when to be where to save key characters. So let's talk about that first, I guess. What do you think about the death of Bronwyn? Seemed like they had fully intended on developing a relationship between those two people. Where, if anywhere, are they going to pivot from there? Do him and Theo continue to have interaction down the road? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of getting vibes that they've kind of said goodbye. They've kind of parted ways, which may have not have been the original intention. Again, because he is just so gosh darn out of place in this High Council of Elves in Rivendell. But they're kind of like, where else do we put him?
Exactly. He went from being the stupid elf in season 1 to now he is the, like you said, most out of place of any other elf I've ever seen.
Yeah. So he had an oath to kill Adar, didn't even end up killing Adar.
Failed.
Yeah.
I'm going to say he was murdered and resurrected, because there's no way he survived that.
There's got to be like an extended edition that shows how he got out of the stab wound through his lungs
into his heart.
And then and then we see him jumping off of wheelbarrows in the next episode. So
Yep. Meanwhile, the Maya Sauron can barely survive the battle and the ride to Eregion in the first season.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, where do you think we go from here, right? We talked about the awkwardness of him on this, and maybe he's not on this council. Maybe they were just as annoyed as us that he was there. But what do you think his role is moving forward? He's kind of been this token Legolas this whole time, right? And so what do you think we do from here, now that there's no, at least seemingly, no love interest with Bronwyn, obviously, but maybe someone else? I don't know. Theo and him seem estranged. We probably won't see them again until there's some kind of conflict in Pelargir. What happens? What's Arondir's destiny? They obviously have one, or else they would have just killed him, right? But they brought him back.
Right. And so this is where I'm like, if he's going to be token Legolas, let's make him the most epic token Legolas character ever, and make this your stunt guy. Make him the sliding down the steps with the shield guy, and let's fully embrace that. And let's not try and give him a storyline. Not every character in the universe has to have an epic hero storyline, because I just don't, especially where,
Exactly. We're already overcrowded, as we've talked about, right?
yes, and there's characters that we know that we want to see that we still haven't seen yet. So unless Arondir is like the future Nazgul, why are we spending time on him?
Yes. A future role that I could see that involves an actual storyline with Arondir is possibly being Gil-galad's emissary to the like Sylvan elves, woodland elves, and maybe filling the role that maybe traditionally Galadriel was, because she was living in Lothlorien in the Second Age for a time. If they stay true to the text, those elves are going to play a role in the Battle of the Last Alliance, and we have to have some connection to them prior to, right? They're not just going to show up on the battlefield randomly one day.
Yeah, there you go. I hope that's not the subject of an entire episode, though.
It'll be parts of several episodes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Whether it happens in season 3 or not, I don't think so. I think that sounds more like a season 4 event. So for season 3, I have no idea what Arondir is going to do.
No. I don't even know if we're going to see that much of the elves. It all depends on where Sauron is, I think.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem like there's much story advancement in building up
to do.
Rivendell.
Yeah.
Our other favorite child of Elendil is Isildur. He traversed the dangers of Middle-earth alone with the help of his spirit
trusted
guide,
steed.
Eric. That's right. Met Shelob and quickly handled her, and met the love of his life, who is still betrothed
and branded.
Yeah, and a traitor. And he's on a ship back to the place where he was just informed his dad is a wanted convict, and his entire way of life has been overthrown. I don't know about you. I wouldn't have gotten on that ship.
I think the only thing that got him on that ship was, well, maybe two things. I think that it was saving his dad. And secondly, I think that he was like, Middle-earth sucks.
Get me out of here.
And also, I just got dumped by this girl, so I'm out of here.
Must have been a bad kiss there at the end. She's like, yeah, I'm good.
They don't even have indoor plumbing here.
Jeez, no, not a single aqueduct outside of Pelargir. Speaking of girlfriend, real quick, and we don't need to spend a whole lot of time, but I do think it's interesting that they did drop a name for her boyfriend, suggesting to me that he will play a part going forward. His name is Hagen.
Yes.
How does he sound for a King of the Dead candidate?
I think that he's right up there. Are you ready to make a bold prediction, or are you just floating an idea?
I'm worried about making too many bold predictions.
I think it's too soon for that one, but I do think it's a good idea to float, and let's see where it goes for a sec.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right about the significance of a name, right? And they chose to give him one. They don't give everyone names.
Nope. So we'll see more about that later. Isildur's still not my favorite character. He didn't do anything too incredibly stupid this season, mostly because he didn't do a whole lot of anything. But
I did like the rite of passage story with him in Middle Earth. And I'm also a huge fan that they did not try and give him a grudge against his father for leaving him.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Theo is bitter, to say the least. His mom's gone, and he does make peace with Eregion there at the end. I thought that they had more to do with Theo. Obviously, he was one of my bold predictions, and he took a serious back seat. We didn't get any more to do with that sword thing that he's been stabbed with. I guess he showed it to the wild man. Almost like a reminder to us that he had it, but they didn't talk about it at all.
Well, wait, that's not the same sword as the key that Waldreg used, right? Isn't that a different one?
What do you mean? I thought he showed him the key thing that he had stabbed himself with in season 1.
The scar, but not the sword itself. Right? The sword itself is in the dam at that old watchtower.
Right. Yes, he showed him the scar.
So, I think it seems like he's made peace with Eregion. Like you mentioned, he's got this chip on his shoulder. I think that there might be some significance to the Kemen interaction in Pelargir at the end. And I think that Theo might, maybe with Hagen, lead this resistance, possibly, against the Numenorians in Pelargir.
They know how to set wagons on fire and roll them down a hill. So
they have learned.
They've got serious combat training.
Do you think that there is any importance to the reference at the beginning of the season to his father?
Yes. I wish they would have done more of that this season, but I think there's still more to come. In fact, let's go ahead and circle back. You asked, does Eregion have a place in this story? I think that's his place.
Oh, bold prediction. Nope. Eregion is Theo's father. Okay. Well, I think we need to mention in this miscellaneous section your dearly departed Waldreg.
May the Valar bless him and send him back. Please send him back.
They're not. They're probably congratulating the wolf that ate him, honestly.
I just don't know how you take such an awesome character. If you're going to take him, just leave him out like they did Bronwyn. There's no need to bring him back and get, oh, he's back. Yeah, Waldreg. No, he's dead. They didn't even show his body, so no closure. No closure for those left in mourning.
Yep.
But whatever.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we dive into Celebrimbor and Sauron?
Nope. Let's get them. These are, I think, our 2 finalists for the MVP of the season.
Mm-hmm. So with Brimby let's talk Sauron first. So first season was all about who is Sauron, right? That was kind of the biggest plot line of season 1. This season, we knew who he was. The audience knew who he was the entire time. How did you think he did? I guess what was some of the highlights and the lowlights of Sauron's performance this season?
I think the highlights for me were the way that the actor portrayed very different characters. He was able to do very different characters very subtly. Like he would be in his Anatar character, but there would be just little flicks of the lip or the eye that you could see, ooh, Sauron's coming out. Or he'd finally
Yeah.
lose it at some points and like, ooh, he's slipping out of character, you know. Um, I just thought that was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also just the masterclass in how to manipulate and gaslight and deceive and commit all manner of wickedness. It was phenomenal.
My favorite parts of the actor's performance, I think, with Sauron, and it happened in both seasons, was you can visually see a flip of the switch when he decides to embrace the Sauron character. Not the Anatar character or the Halbrand character, but when he flips the switch and is Sauron for a moment, right? Uh, we saw it in season 1 with Galadriel at the brook, and we saw it in season 2 with Celebrimbor, right, where he finally steps out from behind the curtain. And I just think that the actor does a fantastic job at giving us the most subtle yet still visual clue that that is what has happened without saying a word, you know? I don't know
Yeah.
if you've noticed the same thing, but I think that's pretty cool, and hats off to the actor for that.
I think we got some clarity this season that showed that he's not like master planning every episode, you know, step by step. He wasn't planning to meet Galadriel on the raft. He wasn't planning on coming across the sigil of the Southland King. He wasn't planning on the siege of Eregion maybe going quicker than he had anticipated, but he is a master at adapting and using every
100%.
opportunity for his benefit.
100%. I think the other thing that they did very well this season with Sauron, this particular season, more than season 1, is portraying a very real depiction of a manipulator's relationship, almost, and to the point of an abuser's relationship, right?
Yep.
With those he's abusing. And I think it was pretty real. I think it was pretty accurate. And I mean, it took both characters to make that happen, but I think they did a great job at portraying that.
You mentioned it earlier, the scene where he is able to mind and body control the soldiers to turn on themselves and kill themselves. That for me was like, okay, this is what Middle Earth is up against, someone with this kind of power and ability. It reminded me of watching Avengers Endgame when Thanos is able to just manipulate reality at will with the
Right.
Infinity Stones. It's like, there is no way to beat this. And I guess Celebrimbor says that to Galadriel at the end, right? He's like, neither of us are strong enough. I don't think there's anyone in Middle Earth strong enough to beat him. It's going to
Yeah.
take something other than strength to take this guy down.
Yep. And what a great realization. Celebrimbor on his deathbed is about the best prophet you could ask for. you know, had some great revelations, had some great, advice, and some great quotes referencing what you just were talking about. The light is the only thing that can beat the darkness. It's not strength.
Yeah. Yeah. What, I guess we're kind of meshing into Celebrimbor here, but we get the title Lord of the Rings mentioned twice this season. First is Anatar saying that Celebrimbor, you can be the Lord of the Rings. You'll be remembered as the Lord of the Rings, which I thought was an awesome little Easter egg. But then Celebrimbor turns it on its head and almost uses it as a term of derision against Sauron and calls him the dying words of Celebrimbor is Sauron, Lord of the Rings.
right after he makes a reference that he is actually a prisoner to the rings, right?
Yes, yeah.
Basically says you are a prisoner of the rings, and then pause, Sauron, Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah, a servant of, not lord ruler over the rings, but you are a lord under the authority or
The
the
control
power, the
of,
control of the rings.
right. And yeah, what a great full circle, and like you said, full circle but inverted on its head, right?
So he says that he dies, and then people have been talking a lot about the tears that Sauron cries at that point.
Right.
What do you make of those tears? What do those tears mean?
That is a great question, and I've thought about that, and I don't know if I have a good answer. There's a lot of possibilities, right? Of, was that the moment that he realized the that he got the idea of the One Ring and just was in euphoria about how great of an idea it was? Was it, that he felt a little part of himself dying in Celebrimbor, especially since he had already likened Celebrimbor to himself in his mind and their relationship with him and Morgoth earlier? Was that a painful memory for him to then think about? Like, I have become the being that I hated the most in this world during the first age. I have become him. Was it, sorrow for that? I'm not sure. Those are kind of the top options I have right now. But what do you think?
I like kind of what you're saying of, does he realize what he has become, and is there part of him that recognizes that Celebrimbor's prophecy is fated to happen? I also wonder, we had that little interaction where Celebrimbor says, um, you truly are the great deceiver, for you deceive even yourself. Like, was Sauron so invested in the relationship, which took, according to Tolkien, hundreds or at least decades worth of years to complete these rings and complete this project? Um, did he get to a level of respect for Celebrimbor and trusted partnership with
Right.
Celebrimbor? And even though he was being so abusive and manipulative, was there part of this great deceiving that where he actually believes that he had to kill Celebrimbor and he brought it upon himself, but he truly feels devastated because, there was such a good working relationship. I don't know.
Right. Right. Did you have any lowlights for either Sauron or Celebrimbor for the season?
Hmm.
Any disappointments in that storyline?
I can't think of any. I can't think of any. You sounds like you do.
I think the only one I can think of, and again, 99% surpassed my expectations, right? Well, this was my favorite storyline of, I guess I already said that about Rune. Um, I guess Rune geographically for that whole area is the most well done, but as far as like people and relationships, this one was the best of the season. The only thing that I wish they would have kind of explained more is they have already brought up this connection that Sauron has to smithing. And I wish that they would have given a little bit more explanation as to why it was so dang important that Celebrimbor be the one that finishes the rings instead of Sauron just stepping in and doing it himself like he said he would at one point.
Yeah.
Right? Which was probably a manipulation. And I think we understand that it needed to happen to fulfill the storyline that Celebrimbor dies by being tortured. But that's not the only way it had to happen. So I'm like, give some sort of explanation as to, you've already taken the time to say Sauron is an expert smith. So why not give a little bit more explanation why you need Celebrimbor at all costs to make these rings? I guess is my only shortcoming.
Yeah, and you're not the only person I've heard make that comment, so that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Anything else with Sauron before maybe we make some comments on Celebrimbor?
Nope.
Okay. Man, the thing that just has stuck in my mind when I think about Celebrimbor is that his conversation with Galadriel outside the forge, where he admits that there was part of me that knew from the very beginning that it was Sauron. And I'm just like, oh man. One, what a gutsy thing to confess as someone who's ruined the fate of Middle Earth for at least the next age. But two, like, just the pain. I just phenomenal job in portraying the pain and torture that this guy went through, and the kudos for recognizing that, through it all, I still had the ability to choose, and I blinded myself to it.
100%. From the manipulation and the abuse to the deception and the self-reassuring, the self-convincing, all around, this is some of the best, most relatable content that I've ever seen, I think, in any genre.
Yes.
Of movies, TV, you name it. I think that this thing that's been going on between Sauron and Celebrimbor this season is some of the most real and relatable stuff out there.
And that's why I can get behind people saying that Sauron is the greatest villain in TV history. I can get behind that because, yep, there would be times watching it and rewatching it with my wife, and would be like, if that is not the most perfect portrayal of temptation,
Satan.
greed, Satan, yes,
yeah.
Hats off to all involved and to Celebrimbor. I guess, are we celebrating Celebrimbor the character, or are we celebrating Charles Edwards the actor? Charles Edwards the actor for me just knocked it out of the park. And it's what made it so believable.
You can't celebrate Celebrimbor the character without him as the actor, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right. Anything else to add for those two?
No, I think we're good.
I think that's probably a good summation of our characters. Hopefully we didn't miss anyone, but I guess I just had some questions for you for kind of the season in general, Brett. So we kind of talked about season 1's goal was kind of character introduction, and as well, like the biggest thing was who is Sauron, right? What do you think the overall goal of what were they trying to accomplish with season 2? What's your main thing?
Two of them. One's really quick. I think the first kind of practical goal was to get the Rings of Power out there in existence, and we've got them. They've all been created. They're ready to be distributed. Check that box off. But I think the big purpose of season 2 was to show us what Sauron can do out in the open. Like, out in the open meaning we know who Sauron is, and now we get to watch him work his literal and metaphorical magic, and we get a taste of how devastating that can really be. and they show his effect mostly on Celebrimbor, but we also see it stretch into Numenor, and through that connection with Farazan. And I think that sets us up for more of the same, and hopefully even bigger and better things in season 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess we'll talk about more what it'll set us up for in the future a little bit here in a little bit. But should we give a good summation of our bold predictions and where they stand? What the score is so far?
Let's do it. So as a recap, I guess just total scores, me and Matt are at -1 point. We may have to rethink the way we do this scoring going forward. Maybe reward extra points for making a prediction earlier in the season. But me and Matt at -1, Cameron at +1. And the outstanding...
It's the only thing I'm winning right now, by the way.
Yeah,
the Utes are losing.
Your fantasy
My fantasy
record?
team is just horrendous. So I appreciate the W here.
If you could get a Rondier on the line, and maybe you can come resurrect your fantasy team.
They need it.
So our outstanding bold predictions, I've got Disa as a ring bearer, which I think is still in play.
Not shut out yet.
Yep. You've got Elrond and Durin's friendship enduring to the end, and not looking terrific.
It's not looking as good as it once was, but it could be as good once as it ever was.
That sounds like a Kenny Chesney or someone.
Toby Keith.
Toby Keith. There you go. We've got Aarion as a Nazgul. I think that's terrific. Well done. Well, not well done, but that should be good for you.
Yeah, I think that that one could go either way. I think Kemen is a more sure prediction for Nazgul, but he could also be viewed as not worthy of a ring, I think. And so that's the only drawback from that potential, I think.
Matt said that we will see all 5 Istari in this show, and that Kemen will be a Nazgul. I think both of those are looking pretty good. I say...
the 5 Istar is... I mean, it's possible. There's just been no reference to it yet. So that is a bold prediction, for sure.
Well, the Dark Wizard did say there were 5 of us.
Correct. But, I mean...
So they throw out the number 5.
Indeed. I don't know if that necessarily means that we're going to see all of them.
Yeah.
I would be really interested to see... For instance, I don't think Sauron's gonna swing by. I don't think Radagast is gonna swing by. I do hope that the other blue wizard maybe makes an appearance, though.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I say that Sauron will personally kill Prince Durin by the end.
I think that's a great one.
You've got Khamul being one of the Nazgul and being one of the masked riders in Rune. I think you made a good case for that one. Lord Belzegar as the Witch King specifically belongs to you.
Yep.
And I added a bold prediction today that we will see Dark Galadriel next season as an effect of being stabbed with Sauron, Morgoth's crown.
And I added that the Dark Wizard might be the Witch King.
So hedging your bets with the Witch King.
You can say it's hedging the bets. It's also guaranteeing a -1. So I don't know if that's...
Very good.
Hopefully both of those predictions were made far enough in advance that they are worth more than a +1. So hopefully it'll counterbalance in the positive for the
there you go.
for the loss. Okay.
Just as a reminder before we kind of put a bow on this episode, we will be releasing a Brimby Awards episode where we discuss, winners of, categories: best character, best costume, worst kiss, things like that. So stay tuned for that. But let's just put a bow on season 2 plots and maybe outstanding predictions for where things are going in season 3, things that stood out to us. Any final thoughts, Stilson?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I wanted to add here at the end. I probably should have mentioned them earlier, but I was going through some of the interviews with the producers and the actors. The showrunners mentioned in an interview that some fans are mourning that there's no Blue Wizard, and they said just stay tuned. So it kind of makes me think that we are going to see the Blue Wizard moving forward. And I kind of thought, remember back when Gandalf was seeing the vision of the staff, and it was kind of flickering between the staff he has and that shepherd's crook. Do you think that might belong to the Blue Wizard? I guess, was it significant? And if so, what does it mean, that whole flickering thing? Because we didn't really get a resolution on that.
Yeah. Did it represent a lesser staff that he would have ended up with had he not chosen the proper path?
Maybe, yeah.
Tom said that the Dark Wizard found his staff. Is there a little bit of resentment in that statement of he chose an improper staff? But his is much more decked out than just that shepherd's crook. So yeah,
true.
Not totally sure.
It'll be interesting to see if that's just something that they leave out in the cold and let the wind carry away, or if they come back to it. But
yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up, and I'd be interested what listeners have to think about this, but we've mentioned it a couple times, is just the power and the significance of names, and especially this season. But even going as far back as last season, remember we had this kind of random interaction between Elrond and Prince Durin, where Prince Durin was about to tell Elrond his real name or his secret name that we don't know yet. That kind of got teased. The stranger's whole storyline was about his name and discovering his name. And he tells Nori, a name is not something someone gives to you. It's something that belongs to you already. You've got to discover it for yourself.
100%. And even in the first season of, who is Sauron and the names associated with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, who are you? Who are you really?
Yep. Mirdania gets really upset that Celebrimbor forgets her name. To not have a name has a connotation of being evil. There's nameless creatures of the deep. The Balrog is referred to as a nameless evil, ancient and powerful. In the Hobbit trilogy,
Galadriel curses Sauron to be nameless
and formless,
and faceless.
Yep. Adar's name got teased, but we never heard what it was. Sauron understands the significance of a name. Remember when Glug shows up and he's like, "Are you Sauron, the person that, I've hated my whole life?" And Sauron flips that switch instantly by saying, "What is your name, Uruk?" And it's like that's all Glug ever wanted was some recognition that he was important and his name meant something.
Yep.
And then I think finally, Sauron himself never actually refers to himself as Sauron, except in the first episode of season 2, red hair Sauron says that I am your new leader, I, Lord Sauron. And then every other time that he's introducing himself, people are always like, "Are you Sauron? Are you really Sauron?" He always says,
"I have many names.
I have many names, ... So interesting there that there's an aversion to his own name. So really cool, just thinking about the power of the name, the significance of the name. And we tried to name our new baby after someone in the show. We tried to get Celebrimbor to work, but we landed on Benjamin. But we'll call him Brimby for short.
Love it. Love it.
He won't, but we will.
Any other thoughts for the recap of season 2, Brett? Any saved rounds or anything?
I think we're good.
If not, let's move into where we think the series goes from here. Kind of what layout you think is going to happen. I can lay my stuff out first, then you can disagree or add on to whatever you want.
Tell us what you got.
So, I think season 3 is going to focus on the fall of Numenor and the development of the Rune storyline with Gandalf and the Dark Wizard. I think those are going to be kind of the two pillars of season 3.
Can we throw some Tom Bombadil in there just for fun?
Sure. Yeah. In the Rune storyline, you mean? Of course.
Yep.
Yeah. I think some of the 9 rings will be distributed for men, and then I think some of the 7 will be distributed for dwarves. I think we're going to get some, not all.
Okay.
And then Sauron, I do believe, will go to Numenor. I think he's going to show up like in person, not just via Palantir. I hope anyway.
Will he go as a prisoner or just as an excursion or?
So yeah, for reference, the way he gets there in the text is that Pharazôn leads an army to do battle against Sauron in Mordor, kicks his butt, takes him prisoner, and that's how he gets to Numenor. I don't think that Pharazôn is going to be leaving leaving Numenor. I would almost bet that Kemen takes him back to his father as like a, look, Dad, see what I did? I'm so cool, right?
Yeah, that's not bad.
But I do think Sauron goes back to Numenor. Speaking of Numenor, I think that we're going to see a little bit of a civil war like we already talked about, and that there's going to be that marriage to hold the peace. As far as Elvendom goes, I hope we see a little bit of the development of Rivendell. And I hope that we see possibly Elrond stepping into the lordship of Rivendell. And with how freely, at least Nenya, Galadriel's ring, has been exchanged at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Círdan lends Elrond his ring.
Círdan?
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, we all know that Gil-galad is who gives Elrond his ring ultimately, and that's whose ring Elrond has in the Third Age. But I guess I kind of think that Elrond is going to be a ring bearer. So we'll see what happens. And my thing is, especially if they're going to continue to keep Círdan out of the picture, right? Anyway, we'll see what happens with that.
Hopefully they get a few more people to populate Elvendom.
Seriously. And that kind of goes along with the next thing. And we've already talked about this a little bit too, but I don't really have any other knowledge of significant battles that happen between now. Well, I guess that I think would happen between now and like the Battle of the Last Alliance.
Which includes several battles kind of all over the borders of Mordor and finally Mount Doom itself. But
so it'll be interesting to see. I don't know, I guess, what the elves are going to be doing in season 3 is what it comes down to.
And I agree, right? We talked about that. I just don't think there's enough plot movement going on there.
Yeah, are they going to develop Rivendell? Are they going to develop Lothlorien? Are they going to send a Rondir into the woods to talk to the Sylvan elves? I think it's Legolas's grandpa that's the king right now over there. Those are kind of the things that they could do that I know of. I don't know if they are. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Elvendom in season 3. I'm not sure. With the fall of Numenor, I think Elendil, a huge number of the faithful and even some unfaithful are going to escape to Middle Earth. Not Muriel. And then I think at some point we're going to see a reunion with Elrond and Durin. I'm hoping. And then that's kind of season 3. Moving forward, I think there's going to be a huge time lapse between season 3 and season 4. Because there's a lot that has to be developed between 3 and 4, I think. Mainly the kingdoms of men. I think Gondor and Arnor, they're kind of starting from scratch. And they're pretty well established kingdoms by the time the Battle of the Last Alliance actually occurs. So I think there's going to be a huge time lapse between 3 and 4. Anyway, that's kind of the rough outline I've got. What do you got to add or disagree with?
I think the only thing you're missing there is some Harfoot shenanigans on the way to the Shire.
Oh, yeah.
Got a whole season built out.
Indeed.
It looks good. Well, that just about does it for our season 2 recap. Again, as a reminder, we've got our Brimby Award ceremony coming up, which will be released soon. Tune into that, and then in a few months we'll go back and do some deep dives episode by episode, having a full season of experience and knowledge with us now. What did we miss? What makes more sense? And we look forward to having you join us on those episodes as well. Also, coming up by the end of this year, we'll have our review of The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, the new anime movie joining the Lord of the Rings franchise. Gotta say, it'll be my first anime movie that I've ever watched.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. I'm obviously curious enough to watch it for sure. I'm trying to keep an open mind about it.
That's right.
But we will have some comments on it. So stay tuned for that.
Apparently Peter Jackson's name is on it. Miranda Otto, the actress for Éowyn, is the narrator. So there's some connections to that Lord of the Rings franchise. And that'll be a lot of fun. And then we'll have our deep dive episodes looking at each of the individual episodes now with the hindsight of a full season of knowledge. What did we miss the first time? What makes more sense? What's important? What's not? And can't wait to share all that with you. So in the meantime, thanks for joining us, and may the Valar be with you. Thank you for joining our fellowship on this episode of The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode even half as well as you should have liked, or liked half of it half as well as it deserved, please subscribe, comment, and share.
We'll see you next time.